This is the Seahawkers podcast. I'm Brandan Schultz of the Military Seahawkers, and joining me for our annual special schedule release spectacular, it is the man formerly known as Boston Hawk, formerly known as Hong Kong Hawk. He is now Cheerio Hawk, or as it is up on the screen, Hawk Van Dyke. How you doing, Dave?
Oh, I'm doing very well. Thank you very much. And it's nice to be here talking to you from West Hampstead, just north of London. It's a wonderful day today.
Have you been working on your accent with the locals to try and smooth it out a little bit?
Yeah. And when I moved from Hong Kong, all my British friends were giving me an over and under of 40 days that I would get my ass kicked. But
did you made the over?
I made the over.
Oh man! Well, congratulations on that. I thought for sure the first time that you met up there with some of our other fellow Seahawks friends like John Davison, I thought he might give you the business over it.
No, he was just happy to see me. He was.
Well, as we do every single year, well, at least for the last few years, I know you like to do a deep dive into the schedule. We had our schedule release show on Thursday. And well, I'll let you react first to maybe any of the commentary that we had to say, because I know one of the things that you were fired up to talk about was the throwback uniform game. Because you commented out on Twitter, I think, and so I am curious to know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, and first of all, that show was great. I really enjoyed listening to that. It was good to hear you guys before we did our show. Yeah, I am super excited about the throwbacks. As you know, I am a Renaissance man with this team, and the second iteration of our uniforms, which was the 80s and 90s, they were so good. I'm pretty happy with our current uniforms, but we had that really horrible period between that too.
It wasn't horrible. It was just kind of boring.
That color was just dreadful. But yeah, Clinton had mentioned, who he thinks that will play in our throwback uniforms. And I was going through the schedule, and I think it's Cleveland.
Really?
It's right in the middle of the season, and Cleveland already has a throwback uniform. So they're just going to go out there in their regular uniforms, and it's going to look like a game right out of 1984. It's going to be great. So Cleveland's a call for me. See,
part of me really wants to know right away so I could make plans to be at that game specifically. Yeah, I was actually at the Bears game where they wore, you talk about awful uniforms. Remember the time where they went with the green tops with the old blue uniform. It was a Seneca Wallace game against the Bears, and it was the one time that they had that terrible uniform. They never wore it again. It was a different kind of green, the older green. Yeah. You know which game I'm talking about?
I do. You're kind of unlocking it like I'm on a psychologist couch right now. It's like I need a box of tissues because you kind of give me PTSD of that day because we did lose that game as well.
Did. So yeah, I think they were up by a pretty good margin. I want to say that they're up 10 and then ended up losing.
Yeah, those were pretty bad uniforms. And it's funny because I thought we would never see that combination again, but they do the action green over blue.
Yeah, that's fine now.
With the current uniforms. Yeah, it looks good.
There were some references to you in that show. Is there anything in particular that you needed to call out before we actually get into this?
Yeah, when I started listening, I was delighted to hear Ryan and you both mentioned that you were looking forward to this show because we have been doing this since, I believe, 2016. We've been doing this since. And it's fun. It's something I always look forward to. The schedule comes out, I sit down and I pick through not only the Seahawks schedule, but the whole NFL schedule and just kind of try to get a good beat on what's going on. I think we beat to death my theory about the rest days. So I stopped, kind of going over exactly how many rest days people have. I think that's also been proven throughout other media outlets. So yeah, I like to concentrate more on the Seahawks schedule these days and then just kind of look at some oddities for other teams.
Before we get into the schedule too, I know that things are going to change a little bit, especially with the transition from Hong Kong to London. The biggest thing is, Dave, you're going to have to get used to watching football games on the day of the game rather than from the future.
Yes, and that was kind of worked out better than I thought it did, because I did move to London in October last year, so I got the second half of the season. And famously, I used to drug myself with NyQuil at 6 p.m., fall asleep, get up at 2 a.m., watch all the football games all night, and then drag myself to work the next morning. And COVID was the best thing ever. I love that monkey lab in Wuhan, because I was able to work from home on Mondays after COVID. But then I moved here, and I thought things were so much better in the beginning, because I was like, oh, this is fantastic. The game started at 6 p.m. So I'll have my whole day. I can actually get to know my wife on the weekends. And then
you have the whole evening for
just
football.
Go watch football. So I watched the first game, and I went from 6 to 9, and then the second game from 9 to 12. And then I remember it was the Chiefs against somebody, and I was all excited because I had a bunch of Chiefs on my fantasy team. And then, of course, the same thing for the Monday night and the Thursday night games. They're at like 12:30 or 1 o'clock. And just no can do.
All right, Dave, well, what do you say we get into our traditional deep dive? I know we try and break this out into the different sections. One of my gripes about the schedule now being 17 games, it doesn't fit into quarters very well. So, and now with an early bye week, it doesn't even fit into pre-bye and post-bye. So I don't know necessarily how you want to break this up, but we could start with the beginning.
Yeah, I kind of just, when I was going through it, it was like the beginning of the season, the middle of the season, the end of the season. Wasn't close enough. But yeah, quarters and halves used to work pretty good. So the way that I broke this down, kind of in the honor of Clinton, was like an in and out type of thing. So there's 3 good things and 3 bad things, one for each part of the season. So beginning with the early part of the season, the really nice thing that we have that you have to kind of uncover is 7 of our first 8 opponents are coming off of road games. And 3 of those are in Seattle, and 2 of them are playing their 3rd road game in 4. So we got pretty favorable tired bodies going up against us.
Them being in Seattle. So some of the games, they're coming off road games, but they're going to be going back to their home.
Yes. In most cases, actually, 4 out of the 7 are going back home, but still they're coming off the road. And that's kind of weird. It's we're not going to see anybody in the beginning of the season on their 2nd straight home game, which is good.
Oh, well, that's kind of nice. Which teams are we facing that are going to be going into their 3rd straight road game, or three road games in 4 weeks?
That would be the Shartnals and the Commies. So those 2 teams we should win against anyway, but there's an extra little thing for us there. Look, extra little gift that the NFL gave us.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's nice, because so, we want to see them get off to a good start.
We might, because there is a bad thing in the beginning of the season. I don't know if you remember this, but there was a season where we crisscrossed between the Eastern and Western time zone in consecutive weeks.
Yeah.
But it was 2016, I believe. We're doing that again in weeks 1 through 7. We're crisscrossing time zones. And I never really liked that. And within that stretch, we faced the Lions and the Giants, who are both coming off of mini buys.
Oh.
So that's really not good for us in any way. In 2016, when we were 2-time NFC champions, we had that stretch of going back and forth, and we went 4-4-1 within that stretch. So that definitely had an effect on us. It's bad consistency. It's your body clock gets all messed up, and I never like to see the back and forth.
In that 4-4-1 stretch, I just feel like they've done so well playing out east, but then I wonder, are you thinking that it played into how well they played at home?
No, I just think that going back and forth just kind of messes you up a little, and you just I keep going back to the well on being tired or more fatigued, but that's when we started seeing them give up leads late or get a tough start, fall behind early. So, yeah, I think it really affects you if there's so much inconsistency in your travel and your game times and stuff. I can't, I know that they have done much better on the 10 o'clock games, but I don't think that applies when they're jetting from 10 to 1 to 10 to 1 to 10 to 1.
Crossing time zones. And yeah, when you have to play all of the East teams, that's going to happen, especially in some respects. It's nice that they aren't then having to do multiple away bye games in that stretch, because they're not going to. There's some teams that stay out and stay in one time zone and make it. The Seahawks haven't tended to do that whenever they've had back-to-back games out east. They've always seemed to make it back to Seattle in between.
Whatever they're doing seems to be working, but that year was bad because of the crisscross, and it's happening again. And before anybody jumps down my throat, it's Lambs at home, at Detroit, Carolina at home, at Giants, then our bye, which of course are going to come home for the bye,
right? At
Cincinnati, and then back home versus the Cardinals.
Yeah, it wouldn't make sense to be at New York and then stay there for the bye. Well, I don't even think they'd be allowed to do that because players actually take off for their bye week. So, but then going back for Cincy. So, do you see that rest ahead of the Bengals game being any sort of benefit?
Yeah, and it's really good. I hate the early bye as much as you do.
Yeah,
but because that early season is just so kind of rough and the haphazard travel, I guess that's a good place for it to be, especially prior to Cincinnati and the best wide receiver core in the NFL.
So sticking on some of the bad stuff, what do we roll into that kind of got you there in the middle of the season?
Okay, so the middle of the season, if you remember last year, we played a pretty brutal 4 of 6 stretch on the road, including the Germany game. And right after that stretch was over, we went 1-4. Again, we were fatigued. We were giving up leads like to Oakland and to
teams ran all over the defense.
Yeah. It's just like it was clear these guys were just they were not themselves. So this year, after week 9, we have 2 stretches of 4 out of 6 on the road, and that would be at the Lambs, then home versus the Niners, and at Dallas, then at the Winers. And then if you want to look at the next 4 games, and there's a little bit of a layover there, but you're at Dallas, at Winers, home to Philly, and then at Tennessee. So that's a lot of traveling.
Those are relatively close, though, Dallas being the farthest one.
Yeah. You know what? I'm not worried that, at least they're not going all the way across the country during that stretch. But
I mean, the Seahawks are just naturally going to, every year they put out that graph, right, that says the Seahawks are going to travel more miles by air than any other team. And it's pretty much always the Seahawks just by the nature of where they're located in the
and it's so
States.
Absurd that you have so many international games this year and Seahawks are still number
they're
one.
Still number one.
So the good thing, and this is the actual stat of this whole show.
Okay.
This is the big takeaway of this whole show. Okay, so we have a great chance to go 5-0 between weeks 7 and 11.
Ooh.
So we have the Cardinals, the Browns at Baltimore, then the Commies, and then the Lambs. So I think that the hardest looking game is who?
Baltimore.
Right, but not. Because Baltimore, prior to that Seahawks game, they have a stretch where they're at Cleveland. The next week, they're at Pittsburgh. Then the next week, they go to London. Then the next week, they come home against Detroit with no bye. And then they fly to Arizona and then back to Baltimore to play us.
Oh, man.
So they have 4 road games, including London, in 5 weeks.
That is a brutal road stretch, though. Is there any more brutal part of the schedule that impacts one team than that? The fact that they don't have a bye after London, and not only that, they do have a home game, but then they have to travel all the way out west before going back home, and that's the game that we play on.
Yeah, they're going to be very, very tired, and I would expect that they will be favored, but take the points on that one. I think we're going to win that game. It's just one of those things that you don't think about, but I think the lead up to the game, one of those announcers is going to go, hey, they played 4 out of the last 5 on the road, plus a London game. And then you can be sitting there in your studio saying, yeah, I knew that back in May.
I knew about that because Hawk Van Dyke brought it up.
So I think that's probably the best thing for us. Not only that 5-game stretch, but getting Baltimore in the most wonderful position we could possibly get them in.
I like it.
So then the end of the season, we have that brutal run that you guys were talking about in the other thing where you have 2 games against the Winers, 1 against Dallas and 1 against Philly. The first Winers game is after their mini bye, which is more of a screw job, Brian.
Well, that's the Thanksgiving game.
Yeah, but that Thanksgiving game comes off of a Winers mini bye.
Ugh.
So the Winers get like a whole week to prepare, and we got to just jump right into this game. And I believe we're coming from the road too on that game.
But I think it's. I want to say it was a relatively close road game.
Yeah, it's the Lambs.
Okay.
And the Lambs we got after their bye.
They're kind of hosing us on our division schedule here.
We'll get to our division.
Okay.
It's not as bad as you think.
All right.
So that's a pretty brutal stretch. I think the only kind of silver lining you can see from that is Philly will be playing us after a Sunday night game at Dallas. So I think that'll be a pretty hotly contested game, and they might be a little beat up after that. And then we go into the end of the season, and after that horrible stretch, we have Tennessee, Pittsburgh, and the Cardinals, which should be 3 winnable games. It's good because the Steelers are the hardest team of the 3, and that's the home game, which is good.
Yeah.
Tennessee seems to give us problems, though.
Derrick Henry gives us problems.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny because it's always a late season game in Tennessee, too.
Well, the last one where they came into Seattle was an early season game. And that was the one where the Seahawks got up big, and then for whatever reason, they just didn't go away from the run like some teams normally do. And Derrick Henry racked up 180 yards in the second half, it felt like.
Yeah, we're back on the therapist couch.
Yeah, I know. Some of these games do that to you, though.
Yeah, I can think of one.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about that one.
It shall not be named. And even though the last 3 games I think are fairly favorable, we still get screwed by the NFL because Pittsburgh plays the Saturday before us, so they get the extra rest day. Of course, par for the course.
Well, that gives us an idea of kind of where some of the pitfalls and maybe where some of the favorable moments are. And I know you always like to look at some of the other schedule oddities, though, that play into for other teams. What are some of the ones that stood out for you this year?
Well, when I was looking at the schedule, as I always do, I really do look at it from a fantasy angle.
Yeah.
I think, I don't want to give away too much because I know some of my league mates listen to this, but I put a lot of weight into the schedule when I pick my players, the bye weeks, the teams that they're playing. Yeah, I'll get to that in a minute. The first thing that was really weird was the Giants get the spotlight game in 4 of the first 6 weeks. Now, normally I'd be pulling my hair out. I'd be like, the Giants on TV again. I can't stand this, but I'll be asleep now that I'm in London. So I couldn't worry about that. And it's the same thing for the Patriots play 3 straight national games in week 14, 15, and 16. So that takes them out of my life for 3 weeks too.
Yeah, well, one of those Giants games is the Monday night game against the Seahawks.
Yeah, so that's the one where I'm going to have to probably fall asleep at 2:00 in the afternoon or something.
You work out your nap schedule.
There are no national games for Arizona and Houston. And that's kind of unusual. They have never, since they added all these Thursday and Monday games, every team has appeared at least once on national TV. And they just said, screw you, Houston and Arizona. We're not going to subject people to your damn play. So
even on Thursday, they don't have Thursday night games?
No, nothing for either of them. So then getting to the fantasy, there is a very bad bipocalypse, as they call it, when 6 teams are on bye, and those 6 teams are the Ravens, the Bills, the Bears, the Raiders, the Vikings, and the Giants. So there's just a lot of good players for fantasy,
right?
And that's week 13. So that's near the end of the season where you really got to get your wins to sneak into the playoffs. So you got to be careful about picking those guys.
So don't go Josh Allen in your draft and then pick up Lamar as the backup.
Yeah, that would be tough.
That'd be a mistake.
But actually, you do bring up something. I think maybe it's less than before, but you had to be fairly savvy about picking your backups because of the buys. And I've seen so many people pick 2 quarterbacks in the same buy. And that's great.
I feel like that's fantasy football, not 101, but at least, 201, 301 level, to where it's tough to avoid it with everybody. But I feel like for the quarterbacks, like if you're just going to go one position deep, and that's not one where you want to be just pulling off of the waiver wire or losing somebody off your team because you have to release one to pick up some scrub quarterback to fill in a gap. I feel like most fantasy players should think about the quarterback spot.
Well, hopefully Sam Gelber and Lisa Carlson are listening, because they were relegated in the first year and they finished at the bottom of League 2 in the second. So maybe they're not versed on fantasy football 101.
Yeah. And for those who don't know, Dave helps run the Fantasy Football League, our Seahawkers podcast, one that's been going for, it's not one that Adam and I have a team for, but it's the one that came up under our Facebook Ring of Honor group. And it was kind of cool because, it was enough to branch off into a second league, and now you do relegation and promotion for some of those teams.
Yeah, Ross, the commissioner, almost got relegated last year.
Oh, no.
The ultimate slap in the face, but he survived. So, it's the same as those teams. The Commies and the Cardinals both have their bye in week 14. Now, again, Fantasy 101, don't pick Commies and Cardinals. But that's the week before playoffs, and that's pretty dangerous if you pick one of those. So conversely to real football, in fake football, you want to have early buys. Right. So you take a look at the teams with early buys, and that's good. One of them being us. And then finally, you want to pay attention to little things like Miami is not getting any cold weather games late in the season because their Bills and their Patriots game is early in the season. Oh. They have 4 of their last 5 at home.
Interesting. All right. So Dave's got Tyreek Hill up high up on his draft list.
Geez, and I'm picking 7th. I wonder if he will be there.
So best schedules. I know you like to rank them in terms of which teams have some of the best schedules, some of the worst. Who have you determined has the best schedule?
The aforementioned Dolphins, because they have the 4 of the last 5 at home and avoiding the cold weather. So I think that's going to be really huge. Good for them. The Texans. So they play, because they don't have any of the spotlight games, they play every game but one at 10 a.m. on Sunday. They play Denver at 1 a.m. 1 p.m. Sorry, I'm still in Hong Kong. And I think that consistency is really key for a team like the Texans. They're not going to have that weird body clock, and they only face one team off a bye, one team off a mini bye. So I think they got a pretty positive schedule. The Jets. Let's talk about the Jets. They clearly have the best schedule in the whole league. Now, people love to judge schedules on the opponents, which is really foolish this time of year. You never know what's going to happen with injuries or just a team comes out of nowhere. But for me, the Jets got many gifts this year. They got 3 straight home games. They have no teams coming off bye or mini bye.
Wow.
They get the Bills after a short week for the Bills. They get the Black Friday mini bye. So my new conspiracy this year, you cue the music. The NFL is done with failure in the world's largest television market. So they are doing all they can for the Jets.
That makes a lot of sense, especially with Rodgers being there, the defense that they're building. We'll get to see more of Saleh flexing on the sidelines. Although I feel like we haven't seen as much of that now that he's become a head coach rather than defensive coordinator. Do you think the NFL, as part of that marketing device for the Jets, asks Saleh to maybe wear short sleeves and flex more?
I do, and I think that they were very kind to make them play so many night games, so I don't have to watch that.
Speaking of going back to some of the weather issues, you brought that up, and it reminded me in terms of the way that the Seahawks schedule works out. Those last 5 games, or 5 and 6 games, well, really the last 5, because San Francisco, Philly, Tennessee, Pittsburgh, and then Arizona. In terms of weather, for one, you're getting the Eagles and the Steelers in your own house, because those would tend to be in December, not great weather games on the road. But you have them in your home stadium. And Tennessee, Christmas Eve, it could be fine.
I'm giving you a bravo. Every year you do this, you picked something that I didn't even see, and that's wonderful. That definitely hits the good list of the late season.
Because you brought it up with Miami, so it got me wondering.
Okay, well, I still give you full credit.
Okay, well, thank you. All right, so Dolphins, good schedule. Jets, they got some favors. And
yeah, so I just wanted to touch on our division opponents too, if you're curious about them. So the Cardinals, they open against Washington. We all know that could go either way. Then they have 7 straight on West Coast time, which is really good. As you can see, because of the way the divisions are, they're playing a lot of the same teams that we are.
Right.
Yeah, we're zigzagging and they're staying in West Coast time. So I think that's going to be very beneficial to them early in the season. Their first Winers game is early in the season. And I think you were mentioning in your other podcast that that's the most favorable time to get that beat up team. And the second Winers game is after their bye. So I think the Cardinals did pretty well. The Lambs, worst schedule in the league. Worst.
Really?
It is appalling. They have 4 teams coming off a bye that they're playing.
Uh-huh.
They have 3 of their first 4 on the road. The last 2 are on the road. So it looks like the league did them a little favor with 3 straight home games. But one of those home games is against Philly, and the other is against Pittsburgh after Pittsburgh's bye. And you all know that 95% of that stadium is going to be wearing black and gold. So the Rams... I just said the word. Can you cut that?
I know. Well, you said Cardinals earlier, and I was starting to wonder what's going on here.
I'm not worried about that. Nobody's sending me Cardinals ads. So you might be asking, why did the NFL give their meal tickets such a horrible schedule? Is my NFL must happen in LA the conspiracy that I've been going at for the last 5 years? Is that theory debunked? No.
No, are you saying that the league is setting up the Rams for a future top draft pick?
Yes. So you have a bad schedule for the Lambs. You have a favorable schedule for Houston and Arizona.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Caleb-spiracy. There is nothing the NFL needs more than Caleb Williams to be playing for the Rams for the next 10 to 15 years.
That's why McVay came back.
Yeah. So they're just going to totally catfish. And I think that it is so funny that I've been breaking down the schedule for years and seeing all these favorable schedules for the Rams throughout the whole process. And then suddenly they just get totally nuked this year. And I'm like, what is going on here? And why are the Cardinals and the Texans, in such good shape?
Yeah.
There you go. And then the Winers, they also got a really bad schedule. They also got 4 teams off of a bye.
Oh.
And 1 off of a mini bye. So they actually have more teams that they face off of a bye than the Lambs even.
Wow.
They have 2 road games to start the season. And I think no matter how difficult our schedule looks, I can assure you that our schedule is better than the Lambs and the Winers this year.
Okay. So as I'm slotting it in my head, that go Seahawks, Niners, Cardinals, Rams, just based purely off of schedule, that feels like how you might rank the division finishing.
That's fair. And that has nothing to do with who they're playing. That does not figure into my schedule research. So,
no, it's mostly just how the rest days impact them. And yeah, that's why we always do this, is because I'm always interested in how it ends up factoring in. One of these years we should go back and, look back on what you said going into the year and figure out if it actually did have an impact.
Actually, I have looked back. Last year, I will, in full transparency, I said the Seahawks will top out at 7 wins. And I had no faith in Geno. And actually, I think at the time that we were talking, I still thought that Locke would be our quarterback.
Right.
So I think there was also a little bit of anger still about the Wilson trade. All I remember was like, okay, this team is going back to that horrible purgatory from the 90s where they were finishing with 7 and 8 wins and, not improving through the draft and not being good enough for the playoffs. But exactly the opposite happened. They were good enough for the playoffs, and thanks to Denver, they got that high draft choice. And last year was just a great year. So going into this year, I think we can squeeze out 10 wins based on this. Hopefully, we will win the ones that we should, maybe steal a game or 2 on the road. I look at like the Eagles game, for instance, where we've beaten them 5 out of the last 6. So,
wow.
Winning that game can even pop us up to 11 wins. So I think the only thing we really have to worry about is Los Angeles Lamb, Caleb Williams for the next 10 to 15 years.
5 out of 6 against the Eagles. That's a little surprising in terms of a stat, because I think there's some Seahawks fans that looked at that Eagles game and said, man, that would be a good one to go to, just because in terms of matchup wise, it seems like a fun game to try and go to in Seattle. But I think, because people like to generally pick wins to go to. But what I'm hearing from you, if we have their number, you could safely pick that one as a game to go to and cheer your brains out.
Yeah. And it's a little perfect storm because, as I mentioned earlier, Eagles are coming off that Dallas game on Sunday night. So, it might be a letdown game for them.
Yeah,
So,
the Seahawks will come in as underdogs in their home stadium. It'll fire up the team a little bit. And, Pete always gets those guys fired up to play, especially those big games. It seems like he gets them up to play for those. The ones that end up being losses are, the games against the Browns and the Panthers or whatever.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned the Browns because you guys had that discussion during the other ones, like, the Browns.
Yeah, because we have PTSD from the Browns game back in the Whitehurst era.
But I was actually looking at the Browns schedule, and, they have the Week 5 bye, so they'll be rested up. They might be in good shape for that Seahawks game. So I'm not saying that the Seahawks will lose that game, but I definitely would take it lightly. And you know what? That's the game we'll be wearing our throwback, so they're not going to lose that game.
You can't lose the throwback uniform game. That would be ridiculous.
If they lose that throwback game, I'm done with them.
Is there any more pressure on one particular game for our Seahawks to win than the game that they're wearing their throwback uniforms at home?
No, and if they do lose, then it's got to be like you're at the roulette table. You got to double down the next week. You got to wear them again.
Got to wear them back to back at home.
Yeah. Wear them until you win.
Yeah.
You gotta chase that
equipment guy, you're not allowed to wash them. You got to go. You just wear that uniform until you win in it.
And it's like, the guy from that UniWatch blog, he's always picking apart how accurate throwback uniforms are.
Uh-huh.
Well, let's make sure that it's accurate to like the 83 or 84 season and not the 92 season. If there was any small nuances, we just got to make sure that, we're not in that 2-14 team.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. You don't want any ties to the 2-14 season.
No, you want the larger ones, not the Gale Ball ones.
And I think with that, there's only one thing left to say.
Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
It's Jeep 4x4 season. Make your next adventure epic and hurry in now for great deals. And now, well-qualified lessees get a low-mileage lease on the 2023 Jeep Grand Cherokee 4xe for $389 a month for 24 months with $5,399 due at signing.